In the spring of 1999, Hong Kong, a city renowned for its safety, was transfixed by a crime so brutal it seemed almost unreal. What began as a teenager's nightmare ended in the discovery of a dismembered body and the severed skull of 23-year-old nightclub hostess Fan Man-yee stuffed inside an oversized Hello Kitty doll. Police and the public alike were shocked that such cruelty, depravity, callousness, brutality, violence, and viciousness could occur in their crowded city. This is the story of the Hong Kong Hello Kitty murder, a case that would haunt the city for decades to come. A tragic life. Who was Fan Man-yee? Fan Man-yee was born in 1976 in Shenzhen, China. Abandoned by her family at a young age, she was raised in an all-girls orphanage in Kowloon's Ma Tau Wai district. Expelled at 15 for exceeding the age limit, Fan found herself homeless. She soon developed a drug addiction and turned to street prostitution to survive. By age 21, Fan managed to land work at a brothel called Romance Villa in Sham Shui Po, a district known for its nightlife. Despite her struggles, Fan made one attempt to build a better life. In 1996, she married Deng Kaiyuan, a fellow drug addict and former customer, and in November 1998 she gave birth to their son. After enduring years of violence and addiction, Fan was determined to change. Neighbors later reported that her husband Deng was abusive and that they often heard the couple's fights and their babies crying. By early 1999, Fan decided to protect her child. She quit drugs and prostitution and got a safer job as a karaoke hostess at the Empress Karaoke Club. She also left her husband, aiming to start fresh. But with her income greatly reduced, she was struggling financially to support herself and her newborn son. Tragically, Fan's sacrifices would make her vulnerable. In the months before her death, she had no criminal record or known enemies. Instead, it was an old acquaintance who would doom her, a petty crime among addicts, the predators, Chan Man-lok and his accomplices. The man at the center of the crime was Chan Man-lok, Chen Wenle, a 33-year-old member of the Wo triad. Chan was a career criminal with a history of drug offenses dating back to the early 1990s. He had been a regular client at Fan's brothel, and he himself was addicted to narcotics. According to court evidence, Fan had stolen HKH for 000 from Chan's wallet earlier in 1999. Enraged, Chan demanded not only the return of the stolen money but also an additional HKH 1000 as a fee. Although Fan managed to return the HKH 400, she could not quickly come up with the extra 10,000. Frustrated and feeling cheated, Chan began hatching a plan for retribution. Chan enlisted two younger men as accomplices. Lung Wailan, Liang Weilun, 21, was a Kowloon-born thug nicknamed Gangsta Yi. Lung Xingchou, Liang Shengdu, about Liu, nicknamed Gangstar, was the boyfriend of a 14-year-old girl whom Chan controlled. Both Lung men were low-level criminal associates who sometimes worked at a convenience store near Granville Road in Sim Sha Sui. They were effectively Chan's henchmen. A fourth accomplice was the girl herself, Lao Ming Fong, a Fong, aged just 14, whom Chan had groomed, likely also a teenage prostitute in his circle. This girl was often with Chan and would later testify in court for immunity. Together, Chan and his gang plotted to teach Fan a lesson. Chan intended to abduct Fan and force her into prostitution, using her earnings to pay off her alleged debt to him. In 1997, as Katie Serena's investigation recounts, Chan enlisted two of his henchmen, Lung Xingchou and Lung Wailan, to kidnap Fan Man-yee after the stolen wallet incident. They seemed motivated by sadistic revenge as well as monetary gain. Chan's criminal record and gang ties suggest he was a dangerous individual. According to psychiatrists, all three men were found to be members of a secret triad gang society and remorseless, with psychopathic tendencies that made them likely to remain a danger to others. Justice Peter Nguyen, who later sentenced them, warned that the trio's cruelty, depravity, and viciousness was almost inconceivable. Each perpetrator played a role. Chan was the ringleader and instigator, the man with the motive. The Lung men were his muscle, carrying out the orders. Even Afong, the teenager, took part. She accompanied them during the torture. Fan's kidnapping might never have been uncovered if this terrified girl hadn't come forward. On the evening of March 17, 1999, the plot was executed. Chan, the two Lungs, and Afong waited at Fan's small flat in Fuyu House, Liu Estate, in Kwaichung. When Fan returned home after work, they burst in. Witnesses later testified that one of them brandished weapons. Fan was forcibly dragged from her apartment. The girl Afong, called Afong in court, later confessed she had helped restrain Fan during this attack. The captors bundled Fan into a taxi and took her to an apartment at number 31 Granville Road in Sim Sha Sui. Police later learned that Chan himself rented this apartment under a false name. It belonged to unrelated owners who never set foot inside. For the next 30 days, Fan was held prisoner in this little Sim Sha Sui flat. Once incarcerated, Fan was subjected to daily terror. Over and over, the kidnappers inflicted unimaginable torture. Court testimony and later interviews revealed a litany of horrors. Beatings with metal bars, sometimes with Fan tied up and hung by her limbs, turning her into a human punching bag. Constant kicks to the head, a witness recalled Chan kicking her about 50 times. Burns, they poured candle wax and even melted plastic onto her skin so that her legs and feet were burned, crippling her ability to stand. And spices rubbed into open wounds to intensify the pain. The men forced Fan to smile and proclaim that she was enjoying each beating. When she refused, they would beat her even harder. Through this ordeal, Fan was also repeatedly raped by one or more of the men, at least Chan himself, during the torture. According to a chilling detail revealed later, Fan was even forced to eat human feces. As another form of degradation, Ah Feng later admitted in court that her own involvement escalated as she sought Chan's approval. At one point, she witnessed Chan kick Fan 50 times in the head and then joined in the assault. Amid these nightmarish days, Fan suffered a decline. She was beaten so severely that she screamed in pain constantly. By mid-April, she was in a near-vegetative state. Tragically, Fan succumbed to her injuries on the night of April 14th to 15th, 1999. The captors discovered she had stopped breathing. Instead of seeking help, Chan and his men panicked and took steps to hide the evidence. They moved Fan's lifeless body into the apartment's bathtub and, over the next 2 days, dismembered her with a saw. To prevent the smell of decomposition, they cooked her body parts on the kitchen stove, boiling bones in the kitchen sink while dinner cooked next door, and disposed of the remains in large garbage bags via the building's refuse chute. In their twisted logic, they decided to save Fan's skull as a morbid trophy. They boiled the skull clean of flesh, then sewed it inside the head of a pink Hello Kitty plush toy, a mermaid-themed model with scales and a tail. In this macabre tableau, a beloved children's character became the vessel for horror. In a dim Sim Sha Sui flat, officers later discovered the grisly centerpiece of the crime, an oversized Hello Kitty mermaid plush doll. Stitched inside its head was Fan Man-yee's cleaved skull. The juxtaposition of the innocent cartoon toy and a human skull would etch this case into the public's mind. Remarkably, this atrocity came to light not through police intelligence, but through a frightened teenager. In late May 1999, 14-year-old Lau Mingfong, the same girl who had been part of the abduction, showed up at the Kowloon City Police Station. She told officers she was tormented by visions of a ghost, that of a young woman tied up and brutally tortured in a flat. At first, the police treated her story as a horror flick-inspired delusion, but her details were oddly specific. When they pressed her, Lau finally admitted the ghost was real and that she had been there. Alarmed investigators escorted Lau to the Granville Road apartment she described. Inside the apartment on May 24th, the scene was nightmarish. Aside from the Hello Kitty doll with the skull, officers found a clear plastic bag containing Fan's single remaining tooth and some internal organs. The rest of her body had been effectively disposed of. Investigators immediately realized they were facing the aftermath of an unprecedented crime. The skull was carefully collected as evidence through a forensic technique called photo-overlapping, superimposing X-rays on old photographs. Pathologists at the mortuary positively identified the skull as Fan's on June 3rd. On the night of the raid, Chan Man-lok was at another apartment in Kwai Chung with his wife, who was 3 months pregnant, and their baby. Hong Kong Police Force's Special Duties Unit SWAT stormed the apartment on May 28th, arresting Chan and recovering items linking him to Fan. Chan's wife, Si Puiling, was briefly detained, but quickly released when nothing tied her to the crime. Meanwhile, another victim of the case, Fan's husband Deng Kaiyuan, cooperated with police by testifying about his wife's past. With Chan in custody, the remaining 2 suspects fled. Leung Xingqiu managed to avoid arrest at first and slipped into mainland China. Leung Weilun attempted to leave Hong Kong using a fake passport but was apprehended by Chinese authorities in Guangxi on February 14, 2000, and handed back to Hong Kong within days. The entire gang was in custody or under subpoena, setting the stage for a sensational trial, evidence, and investigation. Investigators pieced together the evidence meticulously. They found 12 knives and tools, CCTV footage placing suspects near the flat, and even Fan's own necklace hidden in the refrigerator. The necklace was later returned to her young son. Parts of Fan's remains were discovered in trash bins across Kowloon, confirming the torturers' attempts to erase the crime. Police statements and the teen's nightmare testimonies filled in the timeline. Fan was abducted on March 17th, held for 28 days, and died on April 14th to 15th. Inside, the Hello Kitty doll was the most damning proof. Its stitched seams and melted plastic traces indicated the timeline. Police determined the skull had been boiled in that very apartment before being stuffed into the toy. Forensic pathologists described the extreme wounds that would have killed Fan Blunt for trauma, head injuries, and burn damage, and concluded her death resulted from that assault as opposed to the kidnapper's claim that she had overdosed on methamphetamine. Police also relied on the testimony of Lao Feng Ming Feng, who had been granted immunity. In exchange for not being prosecuted as an adult, she was a minor. Ah Feng gave a detailed account of the torture rituals. In court, she confessed to participating in assaults and corroborated key facts: how Fan was beaten to a pulp, forced to endure unspeakable acts, and how her skull ended up in the doll. Her vivid statements, corroborated by other evidence, would become central to the prosecution's case, trial, and conviction. The trial began on October 20, 2000, and quickly became one of the most notorious in Hong Kong's history. The three defendants, Chan Man-lok, age 34, at trial, Leung Shing-cho, 27, and Leung Wa-lun, 21, sat in the dock dressed in identical dark suits and expressionless faces. The courtroom was packed with journalists and curious onlookers, and reporters described the atmosphere as tense and even crazy and scary. Prosecutors charged all three with murder and kidnapping. However, the defense argued that Fan may have died of an accidental drug overdose, as Chan himself had claimed, rather than the beatings. Fan was known to have used methamphetamine, and an overdose was a possible scenario. In fact, DNA tests and pathology could not definitively pinpoint the date or exact cause of death. By December 7, 2000, the nine-member jury had reached a verdict. They believed all three men had indeed tortured Fan over those weeks and that she died during their abuse, but they were not convinced beyond reasonable doubt that the defendants had intended to kill her. In a 6-3 vote, the jury acquitted them of murder, but convicted them of manslaughter and related charges of false imprisonment and bodily harm. As the jury foreman later explained, the jury simply could not rule out a possible overdose as the immediate cause, even though they all agreed Fan died at the hands of her captors. One vivid moment in court came when Justice Peter Nguyen summed up the horror of the case for sentencing. He told the men, "Never throughout the years in Hong Kong has a court heard such cruelty, depravity, callousness, brutality, violence, and viciousness. Even an animal would not have been maltreated in the same way as that received by the deceased." He pointedly declared that even the fiercest predator wouldn't treat another creature so savagely. The judge also noted that psychiatric reports had described Chan, Leung Wa-lun, and Leung Shing-cho as remorseless gangster types with psychopathic tendencies. On December 8, 2000, Justice Nguyen passed sentence. He delivered the maximum punishment for manslaughter, life imprisonment for each defendant. No one would be eligible for parole until after serving at least 20 years. He said the public had the right to protection from people like them and lamented the case as Hong Kong's worst in recent memory. Lau Ming Fong had received immunity and did not go to jail. Chan Man-lok and Leung Wa-lun were ordered to serve life terms at Stanley Prison. Leung Shing-cho initially also got life, but on appeal. In 2004, Hong Kong's Court of Final Appeal reduced his sentence to 18 years on the grounds that intent was not proven. He was released in April 2014 after completing that term. In a grim coda, Leung Shing-cho was later arrested in 2022 and jailed again for indecently assaulting a 10-year-old girl. Several unusual post-trial developments made headlines. For years, Fan's skull, the only part of her body used as evidence, remained in the mortuary. It was identified by her birth family, who had been found only after police advertised the case, and in March 2000 for the family arranged to have it cremated. The apartment at 31 Granville Road where Fan was killed was eventually demolished in 2012. In its place, a boutique hotel named Suravi opened in 2016. Inside, 3 Buddha portraits were hung quietly in memory of Fan. Even small relics from the crime carried poignant weight. Investigators discovered one of Fan's necklaces in the Sim Sha Sui Flats refrigerator, and it was formally handed over to Fan's son. The Hello Kitty case gripped Hong Kong. Reporters noted that the public was titillated by the grisly testimony, as if witnessing a horror movie in real life. Store clerks and bystanders admitted they couldn't look away. "It's horrible, but it's so interesting," one woman confessed in an interview. Many Hong Kongers had trouble reconciling the city's low crime rate, just 1.2 murders per 100,000 people, among the world's lowest, with this account of extreme sadism. As one stylist said, people couldn't help but watch such a story unfold. It felt like something that should only happen in far-off places, not in their backyard. In newspapers and on television, the juxtaposition of a baby-faced cartoon character with real-world horror was unforgettable. One journalist wrote that the case's macabre details kept the public and the local press riveted, especially the image of Hello Kitty's smiling face with a skull inside, the phrase Hello Kitty murder. Itself cemented the crime in public memory. It became shorthand for the very worst of human cruelty. The case was widely described as one of the most depraved crimes in memory. There were few measurable policy changes. Hong Kong had no meaningful way to prevent such isolated violence, but the case left a cultural mark. It spawned two local films, Human Pork Chop and There Is a Secret in My Soup, both released in 2001 to capitalize on the morbid fascination. It also cast a long shadow over how triad gangs were perceived, too many. It underscored the hidden brutality of the underworld. Above all, the Hello Kitty murder case became a grim legend of Hong Kong crime. Even decades later, Hong Kong society recalls it as a chilling warning that evil can lurk behind innocence. Never in Hong Kong in recent years has a court heard of such cruelty. Judge Nguyen had declared, and Hong Kong would never forget what those words described.